Welcome to Journeys with the No Schedule Man, exploring authentic stories of personal growth and lessons learned from people living true to themselves with creativity, passion, and purpose. For all past episodes, subscribe on iTunes or visit noscheduleman.com. And please connect, share, and contribute with a comment, rating, or review. And now, here's your host, the No Schedule Man, Kevin Bulmer.
I've been known to struggle with reality. It's not that it is any real mystery.
The question this week is, when it comes to money, are you a magician, a tyrant, or a fool? Or perhaps you're like me, a former innocent who is currently trying to get away from acting like a creator artist. No, I'm not trying to speak in code. I'm foreshadowing the 8 money archetypes, and more on that coming up in just a moment. Welcome. I'm Kevin Bulmer. Today we're talking about money, and more specifically, our individual relationship, mindset, and habit patterns related to money and the common challenges that sometimes go with all that. Now, to do that, we're joined by Cheryl Campbell, who is a certified money coach, certified financial planner, and chartered financial divorce specialist. Cheryl's emphasis is on helping others like her get out of the rut of living other people's lives and to truly start living the life that they were meant to live. Now, this is really cool stuff. I think you're going to find this conversation easy and enjoyable to listen to. It's a really popular topic, money. It's one that a lot of people struggle with, and Cheryl offers some really interesting and relatable insights that I think you're going to find will help you understand your relationship with money, or lack of it, a little bit better. Some of the things that Cheryl pointed out about herself and about money and finances and what she's learned about people and their relationship with money include, she talked about how it's really about vulnerability and stress, and how adding money and financial thoughts can magnify those things. She talked about how it's really about listening and letting people know that they're not alone. Money is another one of those key subjects that so many of us judge ourselves against. And Cheryl gives some really great insight about letting people that letting them know they're not alone, and how powerful it can be just to be heard, and for people to just feel like they're being listened to in order for them to change their story, or what she calls her idea of doing a money biography. Listen for that if you're struggling with your relationship with money, because that's a really good tip that she shares in this conversation. She tongue-tied today. I'm excited to get to this. She talked about how she was one of those people who wanted all these materialistic things. And then she tells the story of how and why that changed. I thought that was really powerful. And she also noted that she still fights with herself. Every single day it's always a struggle. So sometimes I think it's an easy trap to fall into, thinking that the teacher shouldn't also be the student. But that defies the logic of how we're all evolving and growing and trying to do the best for ourselves, as well as sharing what we know for others. And I thought that was a really great thing that Cheryl shared, that she constantly finds it a struggle to work through a lot of the things that she's discussing in the conversation that you're about to hear. We go over in detail what Cheryl calls the 8 money archetypes. Listen for those and see if you can identify which one are you, or are you, like me, more than one? And then which one would you like to be? I think you're really going to love this. Here's Cheryl Campbell on the 8 money archetypes and becoming a money magician on Journeys with the No Schedule Man. Cheryl, why do you feel that so many of us can be so reluctant to openly discuss money?
I believe there's so much fear around it. So many people believe that they're the only ones, in debt, or that they're the only ones that don't have savings, or they're the only one who doesn't maybe have their mortgage paid. It's really interesting that people feel that they're out there on an island all by themselves. And so when I started to create money talks, which that was the whole premise, is get people talking about money. It's really interesting when people are honest and say that they thought they were the only ones that had all this debt. It's just really interesting.
How common do you find that to be?
Very, 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 very common. Very common.
Seems to me like it speaks to almost I don't want to say larger because I don't mean to diminish it, but a fundamental issue about who we are as a species and our willingness or lack thereof to communicate and express ourselves and to open up.
Absolutely. It's really about vulnerability and trust. And so if you have a very best friend and you're going through, because there's so much stress around money or lack of or budgeting, and you can't even tell your best friend because the fear of being judged or that they may discuss your situation with someone. It's like, who are we then if we can't even take that to a friend? And I always say people will talk about their sex lives before they'll talk about their financial situation. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and most people I know don't like to publicly talk about their sex lives, although that's changing.
Yeah.
Perhaps to some people's significant chagrin, but these are things that are just fundamental conversations that are parts of our experience, are they not, Cheryl? It seems really curious that as a species there should be these topics that so many of us consider taboo, when in actual fact they're just fundamental parts of us being, and yet we still won't feel good about discussing them. Seems kind of weird.
It does seem weird. It really does, because we need money for everything. We cannot function without money anymore. We can't hunt and gather for our food and survive. We need money to build our homes. So you think that because we need money, we would be able to talk about it. And just for instance, I was doing a workshop and we were being honest, and one of the women was telling us how she handles her money. And what she was saying is that because if people looked at her, she doesn't work, her husband is the sole breadwinner, and she doesn't lack for anything from the outside. And so then she told us that she pays for cash for everything. She will go to the bank, withdraw the cash, put it in envelopes, and actually pay her bills and everything that way, her groceries, her bills, her kids' clothes, whatever it may be. It's all with cash. And so I said to her, would you have ever told your friends that? Because they're all looking at you. How do you do it? And she said, no, I would have never divulged that information, that I pay cash for everything and I budget everything. But that would help her friends so much, because they're all thinking, what am I doing wrong? Because she has this. But really, she's just watching every penny she spends, which would be helpful for other women, for other men to know that.
How did you become so interested in this as to make it such a significant part of your career?
I think it was just as a financial advisor, I would go into homes and people were very honest with me when I got in there, and I could see the struggles behind it. And I was so curious. I would set up budgets for them and do financial plans for them, but they would follow them for a short period of time, but they wouldn't stick with it. And so I just kept searching for something. Why is it that people cannot continue? And that's where I found it really had nothing to do with the budgeting. It was the psychology around their habits and behaviors. Where did they learn this behavior? Why are they still using this behavior? And how can we work towards changing it? And then also just learning to talk about money as we talk about everything else, because it's such a stress in people's lives.
I'm trying to think of how to frame the thought I'm having currently into a question. I'll give you context and maybe it'll just kind of come out organically. I'm seeing or imagining in my mind, Cheryl, you going into someone's home as a financial advisor and experiencing that level of trust where they're sharing very personal information and through that process revealing what some of the other issues are that have maybe held them back from having a really good relationship and the psychology of money and whatnot. And I guess what I'm wondering is what your perception is of how difficult it can be for those people to break through those barriers, and whether they just arrive at a point where they just don't feel like they have any choice. I've got to tell someone. She says a financial advisor, I may as well tell her, or if there's some other way to it, or perhaps maybe that's just different for each of us. What do you think?
It is a level of trust, but I don't think they're telling me as a financial advisor. It's just more about how comfortable they feel with the person that they actually end up opening up to. It's a level of comfort, and that may be your best friend if you were comfortable with them, or it could be you, or it could be a lot of marriage counselors will open up about money, or they will discuss money, but the marriage counselor doesn't know what to do with it because he isn't really there to counsel them on money. But so it just depends where that level of comfort is, I think, more so than being a financial advisor, because I wouldn't say most, but a lot of financial advisors don't go into the behaviors around what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, so that's, I think, really interesting, because it is a very, for many people, I think, a very personal and I might even use the word intimate issue. And then so for you, with all of the various things that you do, there needs to be at least some baseline level of trust and emotional connection there. What are some of the things that you find that you do that help people to build that level of good feeling to where they may want to reach out to you and dive into this a little further?
I listen, for one thing. I listen and I hear what they're actually saying, and I let them know that they're not alone. And I almost have to convince them that they're not alone, because a lot of people believe it's only them. But it's just really being open and honest about it, and maybe giving them for instances, but just listening, telling them you're not alone, and saying it's okay. It's okay, because everything can be fixed financially. You really can clean up a situation and change your behaviors and habits if you want to, if you're ready.
I find that really interesting, how you say how often it is that you find you have to convince people to understand that they're not alone. It almost seems counterintuitive, wouldn't you say, Cheryl, with how much information and communication is out there anymore. I'm really interested to hear that the first thing that you said that you do for people is to listen, which I might argue is the most effective aspect of communication. But with all of the transparency and the information and everything that's out there and available to us at our fingertips 24/7, you would think that it would be natural for us to realize, oh, okay, well, there are a lot of other people that are facing the same sort of challenge that I am. What I'm hearing from you is that in a lot of cases, we don't feel that way.
That's right. That's right. They may have, say, they're $20,000 in debt, and they think it's the end of the world, that nobody could possibly have $20,000 of debt, even though it says it in the papers, the magazines, how much debt that we are in. They don't truly believe that. They think it's just them, that they've created this amount of debt, but that's just their reality. So maybe in their backgrounds, their parents didn't carry any debt. So for them, $20,000 of debt is just horrendous. So again, we have to look back. Okay, what did you learn from your parents? What were you taught? And so that we can alleviate that. And this is a different situation. This is you. And this is where we need to make small, significant steps of change so that you can feel comfortable moving forward.
It's fascinating. It sounds to me very similar to so many other things that we paint ourselves into a psychological corners of. There's so much talk about opening up about mental health, and we could be here for the rest of the day naming all of these different issues, but it's almost like these areas that are of challenge in our lives imprison us until we can reach out and get them from outside ourselves and, gnawing away at our gut and our spirit and out into the open where we can start to empower ourselves to get some more information, get another perspective, and then put some tools together to start to do something about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I wonder if we could go into the archetypes. We had a discussion previously where you shared a little bit about the 8 money archetypes that I think that you see or work with most often. You can correct me if I'm not putting that the right way. But I think it might be really valuable to somebody who's listening now to take into the context what you've already shared and then see if they can identify themselves in one of these 8 archetypes. Can we maybe go through those?
Absolutely. So would you like me just to go through and discuss briefly what each one is?
Yeah, let's maybe take them one at a time and see how we feel, if we want to unpack them or anything like that, and then we can kind of recap and we'll just we'll see how we feel about it. How's that?
That sounds great. Okay, so the first one that I like to talk about is the innocent. So the innocent is that person who is trusting, they're happy-go-lucky, they don't worry at all about money. But if something were to happen, so say their partner is looking after the money and their partner passes away, they are embarrassed and there's shame around that because we call them the ostrich, they've been burying their head in the sand. So then they feel powerless, they seek rescue, they may go into another relationship just so that someone can look after them financially. So their primary fear is basically abandonment. The next one is the victim. So the victim tends to blame everyone for their financial situation. So it's either they weren't taught about money in school, their spouse spends all the money, their kids steal from them or are taking all their money, but they are financially irresponsible. They won't take ownership for what they need to take ownership for. Sometimes they have addictive behaviors, but they feel powerless around money. They tend to live in the past.
The victim, that just reminds me of a phrase I hear a lot in the personal and professional growth world about victim mindset. And that'd be, I don't know that these things are mutually exclusive, but it'd be interesting to see for those who just sort of generally feel like they're victims to life, to governments, to neighbors, to bosses, to just circumstances in general, how often that correlates with a victim mindset in money. I suspect, though, it doesn't always, and I'm getting ahead of us a little bit, but I'm feeling like that mindset in life in general might also line up with a couple of the other archetypes that are coming. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. They all kind of go together. If they're a victim in something, they're probably a victim with their money as well, because that's just who they are. That's who they've become for some reason.
Well, hold that thought. Let's get back onto to track. And so we've got the innocent and the victim. What's the third archetype?
There's the martyr. So the martyr may have been a victim, but they've transitioned. But the martyr will do everything for everyone. They can be a caretaker to their kids as well as their parents, so they're constantly looking after things, and they don't ask for much. But when they do, if they feel their needs aren't met, they can turn and they can have this kind of mean streak to them. So they'll give. But if they ask you to do something and you don't do it to their expectations, they can turn on you.
I'm interested in this. I'm trying to get a picture of somebody that fits this equation in my mind, and I've got a couple of them. But so maybe let's unpack this a little bit. The first part, do everything for everyone.
So they're caretakers. So they're that caretaker mentality. So that person who will say, I'll do that for you and I'll do that for you. So they've got that caretaking, but they can be very critical as well. So they're not, if you can feel their energy, that they'll do it, but there's at some point there's going to be a payback.
It almost sounds like a love, but sort of a fear-based kind of love because of that boomerang part on, if it doesn't come back, it's almost like there's a condition on the giving and the love that the giver is not entirely aware of.
That's very true. Very passive-aggressive.
Passive-aggressive. That's probably what I was looking at.
Yes.
Yeah, almost as if somebody with this sort of a mentality loves and genuinely wants the best for whomever it is that they're supporting or giving to, but they're doing that in a way where they have a fairly rigid idea in terms of what is the right way to do things or for things to go.
That's right.
And that if it doesn't go that way, that's where the turn comes, maybe?
That's right. They're not doing it fully out of love. There's an expectation, but the person receiving doesn't know what the expectation is going to be until it's almost like they're blindsided. I guess that's kind of...
Yeah, so I'm coming at this. It's funny. When we talked at a separate occasion, I was thinking about this solely from the standpoint of evaluating myself or thinking that anyone who was listening would be doing something similar. However, now that we're into it and we're diving a little bit farther into each of these archetypes, I also see that there could be value in not getting too tied up in, but maybe recognizing with some of the other relationships, particularly if we may find those relationships challenging to us, maybe where some of those other people might be coming from, because I feel like you're giving us a window into other people's worlds here a little bit so that we can maybe meet that with a little bit more empathy. That's right.
Yeah, good. Very good.
Well, let's keep going then. So we've got the innocent, the victim, the martyr, and then on to the fourth of 8 archetypes.
So the warrior is, they are taking control of their lives. They're powerful. They're financially driven. They're competitive, goal-oriented, financially successful, confident, but they always have that shield up. So they're always on the lookout for somebody to fight, go after them. And what happens with the warrior, they do well, they do great, but they need to be able to put down the shield sometimes and take the advice of other maybe professionals, or maybe it's their spouse. They think they have full control and they're doing everything right, but their spouse says, you know what, let's try something a little bit different this time. But they have a hard time losing that control. So that's what they need to work on, is being able to let some of that control go.
The warrior sounds to me, Cheryl, like an example of someone who may be viewed from the outside as someone who has it all with the money and the toys and the house and all of that sort of stuff, but might be in some state of, I don't mean to overstate it, but almost quiet despair or wanting or longing for fulfillment in other areas of their life.
Exactly.
Interesting.
To put that shield down and maybe let their spouse have some control, or their kids, or so that they can actually let love in a different way. Maybe not always using money for that.
I think the next one, the fifth, is rather a departure from the warrior, wouldn't you say?
So the fifth?
Yes.
Yeah, so the fool, which we all love, because they are the ones you want to be around when you're feeling down. But the fool is the one that says, I'll buy the round of drinks. Let's go to Vegas and make our millions. They're always going to the next multi-level marketing gig, but they're happy. They're happy, and they always seem to make out okay. Their relationship with money, it's easy come, easy go. They don't usually keep money in their pocket very long, but they can be happy. They're definitely a gambler by nature.
Are fools the ones that seem to have a new business card every 6 months? And
yeah, absolutely.
They want you to they want to sell you a car, but then they want to sell you insurance. And I'm not trying to, but and you're kind of like, well, what's going on? But to them, it just doesn't seem like any big deal. Hey, no, I'm here. What about this? You know? Want
That's
one?
right. That's right. That's right.
I'm not being critical. I almost kind of admire it in a way. But
Oh, absolutely. Because they do have that happy-go-lucky sense to them. Like they're not the victim. They're not saying, "Oh, that didn't work out." They're happy about it. It's interesting.
What about the sixth one?
The creator artist. So that is when we say the starving artist, that would be that person. They can be self-employed people that undervalue their work. So when we say starving artists, it's because they aren't able to charge enough. They may have a love-hate relationship with money. They hate the fact that they have to charge for what they love doing, what they've produced, if it's a painting or a piece of music. So they struggle with it, and they need to overcome that so that they're able to charge enough and value themselves and move forward.
I find myself wanting to ask you if you've seen people transform from one archetype to another as their life goes along.
Absolutely.
You know, without, not to get ahead of us, but without getting to the eighth one, but to go from, I don't know, maybe from a fool to a to a creator artist, somebody that doesn't worry about it all that much and I might argue, well, someone with the mentality of a fool archetype might not necessarily be the type to get into their own business, but there again, maybe. It's what the heck, let's hang the shingle and see what happens. But I wonder if that maybe adds to the confusion as well, where you've sort of viewed things in relation to money one way, and then all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself in a different environment, or maybe I'm just way overthinking that.
No, they definitely can. You can definitely move. The fool probably wouldn't necessarily become a creator artist because they believe there's an abundance of money. There's always going to be money, where the creator artist doesn't even want there to have to be any type of money. They'd rather we just swapped work. But the fool can definitely become the magician, which we will get into once they start to value it.
Let's get into to the last two. Let's do the seventh first.
So the tyrant. So the tyrant is somebody who is controlling. They use their money to get what they want. Again, I use the analogy of somebody with their kids in sports and they have money, and so they decide to sponsor the team so that their child makes the team, or they have the big team party and supply all the drinks and food. So they're always manipulating people with their money. They hoard it. They have the chronic not enoughness, that there's never enough, and they just use it in not a good way.
What's the difference between a tyrant and a warrior as far as the archetypes are concerned?
The warrior is really trying to do good in the world. They are using their money for good. They just need to be able to let other people's ideas in, or to let other people have a chance to have a different way of looking at things, where the tyrant is using their money for only their good, not for the good for everyone. So the warrior's got control, but they're trying to do good in the world.
Which, if any of them, do you find in your role, Cheryl, to be the most challenging to work with?
I would say the victim.
Really? Even more than a tyrant, huh?
Yeah. The tyrant, yeah, I do. Because the victim is it's hard to get people out of the fact that you've got to take onus for part of this. This is, you've been through a lot, you know, your life may have sucked, but you can change. Because it seems to be always somebody else's fault for everything. If you ever have been around a victim, you know, it's everything in their life is someone else's fault. It's difficult. I find it difficult to work with that person.
You already, in passing, mentioned the eighth archetype, but let's give it its due, the magician.
So the magician. The magician is the person who believes that they're always taken care of. There's enough money for all of us, that the money will come in and flow out. They're optimistic, they're compassionate, and they're not attached to it. So they never feel that there's fear around money or lack thereof, and they're open to sharing it. and which creates more flow in. So very abundant.
I'm trying to get a picture in my mind of the example of a magician, because now, again, I'm analyzing this from other perspectives, and old phrases like "money is the root of all evil," or rich people are greedy, and all of this kind of stuff. There become a lot of these limiting beliefs and ideas. Or money can or can't buy happiness. It sounds like the magician is a person that doesn't really buy into any of that.
That's right. But then they might, so if we use the example of Gandhi or Mother Teresa, where they didn't really have to worry about money, but there was an open flow of just love, and I think we all get tied up in how much money do we have? How much do we have saved? We can't take it with us. And I'm not saying you shouldn't save, but we can't take it with us. And if we're open to trusting that there's always going to be enough, there's more abundance that comes to us.
Yeah, when you start exploring universal laws, and the law of abundance is one of them, right? And it challenges a lot of the notions that a lot of us grow up with. I was one that just grew up thinking that, well, if you did have a lot of money, then that meant that you were, I'm just looking over the list of archetypes, you were tyrannical, or choose your limiting belief here. But those ideas at their core don't really relate so much specifically to money, or don't have to, as much as what's the vocabulary I'm searching for here? Just the way that we view ourselves and the world around us in general, our own set of beliefs and assumptions.
Exactly. And I really feel that social media has made it worse, because so many people post all these amazing things in their lives. And then we have others that are looking like, oh my gosh, they're going on another trip. They must have so much money, and they bought their kids this, and they have another car, and we get caught up in it. And yes, they may have all that, but yes, they have this huge amount of debt that goes with it. People aren't paying cash for all of this stuff, and that is forgotten. It's not listed on Facebook that, oh yes, I just went on a trip, but it cost me $15,000, and now I have to figure out how to pay for this. So it's difficult. It becomes difficult. And that's, again, why we need to talk about it and not share all the fabulous things that are going on in our lives, or just the fabulous.
Yeah, one of the things that I find central in the work I do, a question that comes up a lot, people ask me things like, I don't know really who I am or what it is that I really want. And I have that in my mind in hearing you mention people like Mother Teresa and Gandhi, and just diving into ideas of sacrifice and giving and whatnot, versus the archetype of the magician who believes that there's enough for everyone, and that there's abundance and harmony and all of that kind of stuff. And I wonder, Cheryl, if that doesn't come down mostly to, again, a personal issue in that, money is one form of, and a common form of, the way that people seem to measure things or compare or keep score. But it's one of only a lot of things that we can look at in terms of what we as individuals value and consider most important to us. And those things aren't all going to be the same. I guess to some, they genuinely crave or look for a lifestyle that doesn't necessarily necessitate a lot of money, whereas somebody else might see it completely differently. But that's an individual thing. You see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And we just need to figure out a way to be okay with what we want, what we're okay with, and not look to others for approval. I think, would you say that is one of the biggest things to overcome? So we don't need the approval of others. Be okay with where we are. Whether we want a small house and we know it's paid for, and we want to drive a 5-year-old car because we know it's paid for, and be okay with that. Not measuring our success by the big house, the big car, our kids having cell phones at age 4.
So I'm curious about, I'll use myself as a bit of a test case here. As you went through the archetypes, I first identified myself as an innocent. So in my first marriage, I think I was a lot like that. There was more coming in than going out, and she was always much more on top of all of that stuff than I was. So I didn't think about it. And I'm just being honest. And then when that marriage dissolved, I was forced to think about it. And then I think I've had a few various cycles through maybe some of the archetypes, but have maybe kind of landed at struggling as a creator artist at this point in my career. Whether you're like me or whether you can identify with one of the other archetypes, what are some of the steps that we could take to open up even the opportunity to become more of a magician?
I guess it's just recognizing where we're at, for one thing. So if you're the creator artist now, we want some of the creator artist in us, because we don't want to live in a material world. We want to be more open to other things in our lives, and the fact that you're giving, because a creator artist wants to unfortunately give their work for free, but you need to value yourself. And once you know that you can value yourself and set a price tag for your work and be okay with it, abundantly it will come to you. Those clients will seek you, and you'll be rewarded because you're open to it, and you know that what you have to offer is worth what you have put that price tag at. But the creator artist is a great archetype, because they're not really living in a material world. They want to give. We just have to know that we are of value, and what we charge is worth what we give.
To become a magician, I think just in general, from the way that you describe it, sounds like there are, I don't want to say some fundamental beliefs, but there does sound to be kind of a core set of things, ways that you may look at the world and your place in it that needs to be somewhat consistent, open, flowing, creating, expanding, giving, receiving. Now it sounds like yin and yang, but the magician sounds like he or she is in a really nice state of balance and flow.
Absolutely. And I know that it seems like a lot of work. Like if you took the victim and we were trying to get them over to magician, that is a lot of work for them. They're going to have to do a lot of inner work, a lot of self-development, but they can get there. But it is part of them, like meditating and gratitude and just looking at the positive. And if you're coming from victim, it's difficult. For sure, it's difficult, but it can be done. It just takes time and moving forward. But people's lives can definitely change when they realize, I had to go through this to get to where I am today, and this is where I want to be, and just look towards where you want to be.
All right, so what about this situation? I've been making it easy, I think, so far, either thinking about it from an individual perspective or from an outside perspective, and trying to more empathetically understand some of the other individuals in our lives. But what about a situation that you go into where you have two partners in a relationship, and you have, say, a victim and a martyr, or whatever the choice is, but you have two different archetypes. So now you've got the challenge where you have each person's individual challenge. Neither of them are magicians. Plus, they have to work together. How in the world do you begin to navigate through that, Cheryl?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So first, what we do is we take the couple, and they have to do their biography. So they do a money biography. We start at the very beginning, their first memories of money until their age now. So they each do that, and then they each read it in front of each other and myself, so that the partner can see where they're actually coming from, because they probably didn't discuss any of this. So it's really, really interesting, because their eyes are automatically open just from that one meeting together, us going through their biography. May have said, money doesn't grow on trees, and if they had to work, maybe they got allowance and the other person didn't get allowance, they were given everything, whatever it may be, it comes out during that meeting. And then from that meeting, we can work towards each couple seeing the other's perspective so that they can understand, okay, this is why they do this, or this is why they do that. And then it's just working together, trying to get them to understand each other and where they came from so that they can come together and decide this is how we as a couple are going to work together with our money.
How often do you encounter situations in an environment like that where one says to the other with an astonished look on their face, I had no idea that you felt that way?
Oh, you know what? A lot, 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Because they're too busy yelling at each other to hear anything. And whatever they may be saying, even if they are yelling, isn't what really is going on.
Yeah, there's a victim mindset or mentality to that too, wouldn't you say, Cheryl, where we're racing around. And again, I think this is something larger than just our relationship with our finances, but whenever there is something that's uncomfortable or sparks in us ill feelings, it seems to be a natural reaction to be looking around for something or someone to blame versus putting something forward with, and here we're back to that idea of trust again. I guess if you feel safe, you trust enough to share your feelings and to say something which I would take to be inarguable, which is, on this subject, I feel this way. But that's an entirely different way of coming about it than, you made me this, or it is like this because.
Yeah, exactly.
How often, maybe let me ask it this way, what's it like for you? How does it feel when you do see the lights go on for people and they become, even if they're not magicians, but they do see a lot of progress and their relationship with their finances improve? How's that feel for you?
Oh, it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding when they actually realize, wow, this is why we were doing this, or this is what was going on, especially if it's a couple and they're actually realizing, you know what? Wow, we were fighting about this for nothing. It's really rewarding.
Do the same things go on, Cheryl, in a workplace?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. People trying to keep up with each other. All kinds of things go on in a workplace. Yeah, again, nobody talks about money.
It's interesting. There are certain professions where salary and remuneration is just tossed around as everyday conversation. And then in other situations, and I might even suggest in more common day-to-day situations, we don't talk about that. We leave it locked up. If we're salespeople, our commission statements are dealt to us in sealed envelopes, and we only look at those with our back turned. And but if we're a professional athlete,
really.
It's just we create talk shows to bandy about whether that's this person is worth it or not. Or you go into an arbitration hearing where one side offers about how lousy you are and you're not worth this amount, and the other side argues. But I guess it all gets back to this polarizing idea of money as measurement and self-worth that we need to get past.
Absolutely. We need to start to be comfortable with ourselves. And then we don't care what other people have for material things. And we are just happy with who we are, and we know where we're at, and we can move forward. But I think it's just a lot of work on ourselves so that we can be comfortable with it.
What are your thoughts on money as an idea, versus a thing, so to speak?
Money as an idea, that's a good question.
Like an energy, or for those that have a difficult relationship with money, to almost build it up as some evil demon that exists.
Oh, absolutely.
Is conspiring. Whereas really, I've read some other material, Cheryl, just to give some further context of that, it's really more of an energy, an idea, depending on how you think about it, about the coming and going and flowing. But if you just try to, sit down and go, okay, world, show me. I was just going to say Jerry Maguire, show me the money.
Yeah,
but,
really.
But you know what I mean? Like, we think about the paper stuff, but that's becoming even less tangible now, and we're investigating cryptocurrencies and all of these kinds of things. That it really almost seems to be an idea of what we perceive it to be, that either we allow it into our existence or create a really difficult idea about it.
I agree. That's so true. It's very true. It really is an energy. We just use it for to meet our needs, of course, but we can make it as evil as we want, or we can make it as good as we want. And it's all in our mind.
What was the point for you, whatever it was along your life, where there was a light that went on? You mentioned earlier about some of the situations that you recognized when you were a financial planner, but what got you interested in finances and numbers and that kind of stuff to begin with?
I think I just always liked money. I liked the idea of money. And I was one of those people who wanted to have everything, the materialistic things. And then one day, after I got as far as I wanted to go, it's like, you know what? I'm not even happy with money. All of these material things, they don't matter. And that's where I wanted to take a step back and say, okay, so I have to be, and that's why I say you have to be okay with who you are and not always be looking at, okay, I want to catch up to them. I want to have what they have. Look at all those things they have. It doesn't matter. I admire those people that still live in the same house that they got married in. They've had it paid off for years. They don't care what car they drive, but they're happy. You can see that they're actually happy. So it's us being comfortable with who we are and who we want to be, and not always striving to be that person.
How did that show up for you? Like, what do you remember about arriving at that point where you thought, gosh, I kind of got all this stuff, or have experienced these things I dreamed about, and now I'm sort of at this point in my life, and what's next? How did that look for you?
I think I was just working all the time, and I'm like, I don't want to work anymore, and what am I doing this for? Because it's really not going to look any different. Our lives are so short. And I have a sister-in-law that is battling cancer, and she is the most amazing, happy person that I've ever met. And it's like, I'm not happy and I'm not even sick. So what would that look like for me if I was actually sick? Plus, trying to make sure I had the same life as my neighbors or my coworkers. It was interesting, to say the least.
What were some of the things that you discovered that maybe you were missing or wanted to invest more time toward that you weren't at that point in your life?
I think it was more, my kids were a little bit older, but it was being around for my nieces and nephews. My brothers had always come to my kids' games, and I wasn't doing that. I wasn't walking the dogs. I wasn't doing my morning practice of just being still and not looking at my phone. I was constantly getting up, starting to work, and moving forward, and there was no need to do that. I was missing out on life. I guess that was it.
And how does that look compared to, or how does now look and feel compared to then? I go home earlier. I go for a walk with my dogs, but I fight with myself all the time. If I say, you know what, I could take tomorrow off, I fight with myself. So it's always a struggle. It's always me learning, this is how you want to live your life. You just have to change. So it's small, significant steps so that I can change my life and be the change I want other people to see. I think that's really interesting and important, and I appreciate you sharing because I really resonate with that. I fight with myself, you said. I found, Cheryl, I wonder how similar this feels in your experience, that once you've, I shouldn't say you, I'll say I found that once I understand a thing or I come to a certain level of awareness about something, I can't go back to not knowing it again. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
So in this context, it's, well, when I get to the end, whenever that's going to be, am I going to regret that I worked less? Or am I going to regret that I didn't go spend more time with my niece or my nephew, or spend more time walking the dog, or out in nature, or in stillness, or being present, or appreciating, breathing and being while I'm here? But even coming to that level of awareness still, and this might sound basic, but I fight this multiple times every day as well, and I'm hearing that you do too, and this is another example of where I'm hoping people will hear it's not just you. That you still, that's an ongoing dialogue. You said the word fight. That's nothing to be ashamed of, is it? It's part of the process.
No, absolutely. And at least we're fighting and not giving into it, I guess, and going, oh, forget it, I'll just work. It's easier. So, yeah, I think we have to fight to change with ourselves.
I guess that's where it comes down to really feeling more solid about knowing who you are and what you value. Because then you'll know what's worth fighting for, right?
Absolutely.
So this is maybe part of the process from going to being a martyr to a magician, or a victim to a fool.
Yeah.
to a magician is I can think back of a number of things in my life where one of them was with alcohol, which may seem unrelated, but once I got to a point where I thought, I'm doing this an unhealthy amount, I'm going to have to change, I could never go back to not feeling that way anymore. You know what I mean? I could sort of to draw that to a financial example. If I'm overspending and driving myself into debt, and I know I am, I either engage in I don't want to say fight, but the awareness of doing the work to change, or I just spend myself into oblivion. Or to use the other analogy, just drink myself into oblivion because I don't want to have to think about it anymore. But once you've got this awareness, there is an ongoing struggle. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't make you flawed. It makes you human, and it also makes you aware that, it's actually a sign of progress, and I am moving forward, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be comfortable, does it?
Oh, that's great. It's absolutely perfect. I think you need to be there, or you fall back. Like if you use alcohol, well, say it's 4 days since your last binge and you're feeling good again. And so you do another binge. It's the same with spending. What would happen with people is if they did not suffer enough, then they get out of debt, they're feeling really good, and then they start spending again, and then it gets away with them. So if you, like you said, if you cannot go back to knowing what you now know, then it's a progress, because you now know it. You didn't like the way it felt, and you don't want to go back there.
Cheryl, this has been really, really valuable. There's a lot of great stuff that you've shared with us, and a lot to consider and think about. And I hope that anybody that's still with us and listening has found it valuable. And I encourage them to reach out to you as well, just so that people know if anybody is wanting to open up and discuss how they can maybe improve their relationship with money. They can work with you regardless of wherever they are around the world, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So CherylCampbell.ca, which I'll post with the blog for this episode, is that the easiest way to start that conversation and to find you?
Yep, definitely. That's perfect.
Cheryl, thank you so much for this. It's really been a pleasure. I look forward to many more conversations, I hope. And maybe the next one we'll do, well, I don't have a dog to walk, but I'm always up for slowing down and getting out myself as well.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
If you'd like to connect with Cheryl, that's easy enough to do. You can find her on her website at CherylCampbell.ca. She's also pretty active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and I'll make sure I have the links for all of those social feeds and her website as well up on the blog post, the show notes listing for episode 82, and you can find that at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you like this episode, I'm pretty sure you'll also like episode 73. It's called Fun, Freedom, and Flow with Matthew Kimberly. I really enjoyed that one. Episode 67 also came to mind while I was talking with Cheryl. That's with Dan Martell. It's called How Do I Create a Life I Love? And I also think if you like listening to Cheryl, you'll probably really enjoy what Michael Doyle had to share in episode 44. That's called Living Fully. You can find those and all past episodes of this podcast worldwide on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music, pretty much wherever you find podcasts. And of course at noschedulemanpodcast.com. If you'd like to connect with me, I'd love that. Just look for No Schedule Man on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. Visit me at kevinbulmer.com. And if you like, jump on one of my email lists and get periodic emails to support you on your journey of personal and professional growth. You can also be a part of my online mastermind and mentorship community. It's called the Turtle Tribe, and it's ideally suited for people looking to embrace the process of their own personal and professional growth from their own place and at their own pace. If you'd like to learn more about that, maybe start a free trial membership, just slide by theturtletribe.com and you'll learn everything you need to know. Thank you so much for listening and spending this time with me. I hope it helps. If it did, please subscribe wherever you may be listening. It would be great to have you here again for the next chapter of Journeys with the No Schedule Man.
Just a little deja vu.